Here at the Digital News Desk with a Watertown City Council candidate, Shane Garrabrant is a Watertown resident and going to be talking about the issues that he thinks are important as we approach the next election. So good to see you and thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Making your announcement here with us. My first question is, who are you? Many people may not know you. You've been at a couple of council meetings. You've spoken at them. But give us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what your profession is and your background.
Yeah, so I'm a lifelong city resident. I graduated from IHC, went to Clarkson. I'm 30 years old. I live in the city with my wife and my two daughters, aged 3 and 11 months. I'm an electrical engineer. I work at Jadestone Engineering in the city. I was on the hydro committee in 2021, so I have some experience, in city issues, city government. And yeah, I'm running, I think, mostly because I'm passionate about the city. This is my home. It's where I want to live. It's where I want to raise my family. And I want my girls to have, the opportunities and the childhood that I had in this city. And I feel like, the next term, the next 4 years, there's some very important issues that are coming up that are going to shape Watertown's future for a lot longer than just the 4 years.
So born and raised, went away to college, but stayed in the North Country, came back to here, and so this is something near and dear to your heart in terms of the future of the city.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'm at least third generation here. My mom was born and raised here. My grandfather was born and raised here. Yeah, I'm in it for the long haul.
So you have some roots.
Yes.
Let's talk about the issues that you are running on, and there are several of them, but you were on that hydro committee.
Correct.
The hydro contract with National Grid worth millions of dollars to the city of Watertown every year, and it gets more lucrative as the years go on. We're approaching the end of that. At the end of 2030,
correct,
is when that's going to be done. Right now, there's no plan that is public in terms of what happens after that. That revenue just disappears. There's got to be some kind of next step. Let me ask you this first, that the price that we're getting, that the city of Watertown is getting right now for the hydropower, under a new contract, we're not going to be anywhere near that price, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we're getting around 30 cents a kilowatt hour right now from the National Grid contract. For reference, the current market rate is around 5 cents a kilowatt hour, so it'd be quite a big loss. The hydro committee, we brought in a consultant who has 35 years experience in this field because it's a very complex field, and that's part of the issue. It touches upon engineers, lawyers, business. It's not, one person is not going to have the total solution to the issue. So the consultant came in and he gave some recommendations, and he estimated, potential financial outcomes from those recommendations. His recommended solution thinks that we can get around $2.5 million a year average from the hydro committee or hydropower contract if we move forward. However, we're getting about $4 million a year, so it will be a decrease, but it might not be quite as dire as people are thinking.
So is that the recommendation? Is that the way to move forward, is to try to re-sign something with National Grid?
It wouldn't be with National Grid, no. I don't want to dive too deep into the weeds, I guess, but his recommendation was we could sell to residential power markets through the New York ISO. There's 4 different products that we could sell. Power, capacity. We could apply for some New York State clean energy credits to the 2016 Clean Energy Standard. And then we can also sell spinning reserve, also known as VARs. And so we could sell those products, bring in revenue from those, and then we could then start a consumer choice aggregate, CCA, that we could then buy more wholesale power, sell it to the city residents at a discounted price. So we'd be getting revenue kind of from 2 different streams.
Revenue there could be a better price for the city, for residents. As you said, deep in the weeds, and so let's pull back out of that. But this discussion, is it happening in City Hall right now to this level? I mean, we're 5 years away from that deadline, right?
Yeah.
And if it isn't being done in City Hall, if that conversation isn't being had, Is that the reason that you're running for council?
Yes, I was unsure, I guess, after the Hydro Committee report was presented. I was unsure of what was happening at City Hall with this issue, but based on conversations at the past couple of meetings, it appears as that's kind of where it's been left. And I don't necessarily blame council or city staff for that. Like, it's a very complicated issue, and it can be hard to know where to go next with it. But that is why I'd like to run, is I'd like to be the person up there kind of hammering on this issue every meeting until we have a solution, until we have a resolution to this that's going to, benefit the city and create as least harm from the end of the contract as possible.
You kind of feel that the ball is just there and that someone needs to pick it up and run with it?
That's how I feel. I don't know if that's the reality, but that's how it appears to me. I think that's how it appears to a lot of the city.
There's going to be probably things behind the scenes that you don't know about at City Hall.
Correct.
And such, but in terms of being out there and being vocal about it and show that someone is fighting for a resolution and not just letting the contract run out and then hands up in the air, what do we do?
Correct.
You want to be that person.
Correct. I want to be almost a spokesperson for this, presenting, being transparent about where we're at. And I like I said, it's not going to be one person's going to be able to solve the issue. I'm not going to be able to solve the issue by myself, but I do think we should be collaborative as an entire city. We should be reaching out either to the consultant that helped with the hydropower report or a similar type consultant, and look into the different recommendations given and how do we proceed, how do we even start to proceed with pursuing those. I do know there's concern about how far we can go pursuing those while the National Grid contract is still active and not wanting that to be terminated early. So I'm sure that is a concern within the city government as well.
Do you think the hydro plant is the city's greatest asset?
I don't know. I can't say, I guess, if it's the greatest asset, but it's definitely an asset, and it was deemed a generational asset in the report, and one that we should not just abandon, one that we should continue on with for as long as we can.
Let's talk about other issues.
Yeah.
What are some other things on your list that you think are important or that you're hearing from people? Because you've been going door to door, getting your petition signed. You're close to having enough signatures to turn them in, making you that viable candidate to be able to go on to the next round or next part of phase of the election process. What are you hearing from people? What's important to you?
I mean, I think the big one is people, the taxpayers I talk to want fiscal responsibility. We have a giant budget shortfall looming, and people don't want to see their taxes raised. With how the economy has been, just the past 4 or 5 years, everything costs more. We don't need our taxes to go up on top of that.
Last year when you opened up your tax bill, no, you didn't open it up, but I mean last year when you heard that you could have been opening up your tax bill and having a 19% increase, you lived in the city. What did you think?
It was a concern. I said to my wife, if this goes through, I don't know if we can afford to stay in the city. And I love the city. I love being here, but a tax increase like that would be very severe and be very devastating to the residents that live here.
Fact of the matter, though, right? I mean, as you said, there's a budget deficit looming. The reports out of former city manager Ken Mix and current city manager Eric Wagner indicate, from numbers from the comptroller Jim Mills, that in a couple of years, the savings will run out at this pace and this direction the city's going. The savings will go away, and they'll be looking at a $6, $7, $8, even $9 million deficit. So, I mean, that's a real concern. Do you think? So you're hearing that people out in the community recognize that that's the direction that we're going?
Yeah, that's a big concern from what I hear, and people. I mean, they look at the spending that we've done, and now how there's going to be a budget shortfall, and it's a concern, and a lot of people think that the council kind of needs to pivot in a different direction. And we got to go through, they say they're going to go through the budget this year, but we need to do this for years to come, of go through the budget line by line and deem what's essential, what's non-essential, what can be cut, and try to prevent these tax rate increases as best we can.
What other issues do you see? I'm going to come back to that, but what other, let you give you your issues here first.
Yeah, I mean, I look also at the homelessness crisis, for lack of a better word, as that's a serious issue for the city. That's something that I never remember growing up dealing with, and I recognize that for the most part, it's in the county's domain in terms of what can be done. However, when my wife is pushing a stroller down on the square, it doesn't make me feel any better knowing that. So I feel like we need to really dive into that situation and see what can be done. I would personally like to see almost a form of task force formed where we put together, social workers, people from the county, law enforcement, religious organizations, nonprofit organizations, get a bunch of these people in the room with diverse points of view and identify what solutions we can come up with, what are the root causes, stuff like that, to see if there's anything that can be done. And just because it might not necessarily fall in the city's domain doesn't mean that we can't be part of the solution.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on the list?
I also think government transparency is very important. And I don't just mean, like the ethics issues and things like that. Just simple things of promoting city policies. There's a lot of confusion sometimes in terms of like what the actual city policy is. Like for instance, like the sidewalk program. It seems like several times a year there's talk of people want their sidewalks done, but there's a sidewalk program, but no one seems to know the order in which these sidewalks are supposed to be done. So I feel like we can just promote what the actual program is. And going back to the ethics and the golf course, the issue I see in terms of transparency there, I mean, you can put aside everything else that's been talked about ad nauseum, is it never made sense to me of how city officials, while working on behalf of the city, could sign a non-disclosure agreement with a private organization, and then so that when they're trying to explain the deal to the public, well, there's elements of the deal they can't tell the people whose money they're spending. That's never sat right with me. I think that's something that should be addressed either through a resolution to the charter or something like that, because it doesn't sit right with me.
So they're using your taxpayer money to buy something. They sign an NDA. You ask questions to say, is it a good investment? Is it the right way to spend my money? They say, I can't tell you.
Exactly.
That bothers
and
you.
That happened during the golf course purchase. It did, and it never made sense to me how that's possible. It's not, if you want to spend your money and sign an NDA, that's perfectly reasonable, but if you're going to spend the taxpayer money, I don't see how that's allowed.
So that's some of the stuff I would bring up in terms of budget and fiscal responsibility of where you are. I would ask you about the deal with the golf course. So you'd be coming in, if you were elected, you'd be coming into a time when you might be making decisions of, okay, the golf course losing money, did better the next year, still losing money, but maybe some one-time purchases, might be getting close to even. Where does the golf course stand in your list of, hey, these are the wants that we should be able to have?
Yeah. In terms of the golf course, I'm not necessarily opposed to the golf course. It is a city institution. It's something I grew up with. It's something I'd love to see stay open. However, when we're talking about the tax rate increases that we're looking at in Prospect, we need to be looking line by line. And with the golf course, when this was proposed to the public, this was a money-making enterprise. It was not. It was a way to bring in profit to the city. That the goalposts on that have shifted slightly, and now it's a land deal. It's being compared to the municipal arena, but that was not what it was when it was purchased. This was supposed to be something that brings in revenue. So, if when I'm on council and if elected and if it's still open, I feel as though it needs to prove that it can at least break even fairly quickly, and otherwise, I don't see how we have much alternative to do something else with it. That being said, I do feel like there are ways to potentially bring in more revenue with it. I mean, we're leasing out the restaurant portion for $1 and $5 the past 2 years. I feel like we need to either be getting better value for that or attempting to run it ourselves. I could see how we could bring in some sort of event coordinator and trying to, hold wedding receptions, showers, private parties there, just additional sources of revenue to the bar restaurant area rather than just a drink after your 18 holes.
The flip side of, maybe not the flip side, but if you're gonna be critical of the golf course losing $250,000, the arena loses $500,000, right? And so the next question that someone would ask, well, okay, how can you support keeping the arena open? And you just can't go around shutting down all the recreational things that Watertown has. So if the Watertown golf course comes to that point where it's like, okay, we have to look at line by line, that has to go. How do you defend the arena?
Well, the arena serves a wider group of the community. The golf course is a very niche market. There's a lot fewer people that are able to really use the golf course or do use the golf course. The arena, I mean, it serves for local hockey, local skate. Even when in the off seasons of that, it's holding events. I mean, I went to the dinosaur event there with my family. It serves more of the general public than just the golf course. It's more of a service than the golf course is, and that was the intention of it. The municipal arena was never intended to make us money. It was intended to serve the community. So that'd be, I guess, kind of how you have to try to draw the line. Obviously, tough decisions are going to have to be made, though.
As you look at the budgets ahead, what is a comfortable tax rate increase? Because clearly it can't just stay at zero, right? I mean, what can you tell? Something has to give, right?
Right.
What's comfortable?
I can't say a specific number that's comfortable. I think the council is just going to have to work together to try to minimize it as much as possible. Obviously, 19% or whatever was proposed is not going to fly. So I can't say a firm number, but I'd say we have to minimize it as great as possible because we need to be attracting residents, businesses to the city, and raising drastic tax rate increases are not going to be what brings them in. If anything, it's going to be what pushes them away.
Is there one, and if your answer is no, it's fine, is there one drastic outside the box thought that you have that could improve things in the city, whether it's doing an event or something? I mean, is there something like that you kind of think about?
More long term than short term. I think a big issue is we need to retain our youth. I graduated from high school 2012. I'm one of, probably 20% of my high school class that's still in Watertown. I think we need to do a better job of trying to keep our youth here and attracting them back when they leave. And I think one way that we need to be investigating is trying to bring in, large scale employers to the city. And I know the immediate answer would be, well, this is New York State. It's hard to bring businesses here. But I look at, there's a GE plant in Schenectady. There's the Corning glass plant in Canton that's thriving. You have Micron hopefully coming to Syracuse in a few years. I'd like to know what made them choose those locations and why not choose Watertown. And so that'd be something on the long term I think that we as a city could be looking into. We could be meeting with those companies of why'd you choose where you chose. We could be meeting with those municipal governments saying, how did you lure these companies there? Because I think that would be a good way to retain our youth, because companies like that, they hire a wide array of skill sets, of education levels, of salary ranges, and we do have an employment base here. We have very talented, educated youth that leave. In addition, we have Fort Drum, where many of those soldiers, when they want to get out of the military, a lot of them want to stay here, and that would be a great incentive for them to stay if we had larger scale employment. But that wouldn't be something, obviously, you'd do in a year. It'd be something we'd have to really plan for as a city.
Yeah. I mean, the iron's hot, right? Because you have Micron. There are other companies that follow it, and there are, conversations, I'm sure, to try to lure something to it. But interesting to hear you have that perspective. As you look at the bickering on city council, does that bother you? How would you be someone to get into the fight or tell them to knock it off?
I definitely would not be someone to get into the fight. I'm not a confrontational person. I'm not a showy person. I'm more there to get the job done. I think other than it being not a good look for the city and the city government, it's mostly just a distraction. We're at the last meeting, we're rehashing old issues that have already been discussed ad nauseum, where we're not looking at, say, the hydro issue, where we're not looking at the long-term success of the city. We're focused on things that really don't affect the general taxpayer. They're more limited to a handful of individuals.
The fire department is always a big one. When it comes to the budget, public safety is clearly going to be one of the largest cost, police and fire. There have been, thoughts in the past of, fights in the past
Yes.
with the fire department. Do you have a stance on minimum staffing and the fire department?
I don't, at this point, I don't feel as educated as I need to be to speak on that. I do think in terms of budget, when you're talking about essential versus non-essential, law enforcement and public safety would be on the essential side. To what extent, I guess, would be up for debate, but they would not be near the top of the list of things to cut. I don't believe.
So you're not a candidate that's going to come in and directly go to that sort of cutting?
I don't believe so.
Another issue that was just in the last meeting with council, the flag raising policy. Do you have an opinion on flags?
I don't think I have a firm stance. If I had been on council, I think I would have voted with Mr. Schoen and Mayor Pierce, not being against any of the organizations that want to run flags. I just feel like it's a liability issue for the city when you're going to be the arbiter of good taste in terms of what flag, what organization you're going to have up representing the city and all of the city residents. I understand it's meant to celebrate a community within the community, but I feel like it's a liability issue. Eventually, the line will need to be drawn of what flag do we not want to raise, and I just feel like that's a liability issue that the city doesn't need to take on. If you're a private business, if you're a home, go ahead and fly whatever flag that you want to support whatever cause you want to support. I just don't think the city and City Hall needs to be getting into that business.
Mm-hmm. Just for the record, the city attorney did come back and say it's low risk in terms of any kind of liability. So as you're concerned about liability, just for the record, it is at a low risk is what the city attorney did tell council. Anything else you want people to know about you?
I think that the city should know that I'm going to listen to the residents. I want to be a true representative of the taxpayer. I feel like certain members of council may have gotten away from that in the past. I feel like the city and its residents are hungry to have a voice and have a true voice on council, and that's the intent of council. They're not necessarily supposed to be city leaders. They're supposed to be representatives of the public, and that's what I truly want to be. And that's one thing I'm looking forward to, of gathering and completing getting these signatures, is just meeting with people and find out, well, what's your perspective on this issue? What issue are we not talking about that needs to be talked about more? And I really want to be that for the city, as someone that can be a voice and a true representative.
You're like one of maybe 10, I think, right now that want to run for council, trying to gather petitions and signatures. Has it been tough? Is it tough to get those signatures with so many people in the field? It
hasn't been tough so far in terms of I've gone door to door. I mean, it is tough getting people to answer their door, especially in some of the weather we've had. But I haven't run into too many people that have said they've already signed 2 petitions, and I haven't run into too many people that have said they're not interested in signing the petitions. I've had some really nice interactions so far, so it hasn't been too bad.
And each resident can sign up to 2, just to put that out there.
Correct.
Shane Garrabrant, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.